ocean deep, deep praise, ocean deep, deep praise, ocean deep, deep praise, ocean deep.
I love that song so much. It actually is the first song that I participated in writing and getting published. And I really have to say all praises to the great Noriko Wright, Oling Wright, trying to pronounce her name correctly. I was pronouncing it with that Southern Noriko, you know how we do down south. That is Pray Ocean Deep, and it's based on a sermon series that I did in 2017. I'm not sure. That it was about how to pray and go beneath the surface, and so and by that, what I mean for the sermon, I mean it could mean anything for you for the song, but for the sermon series, it was about prayer that goes beneath the surface of conscious awareness, that goes beneath the mundane aspects. You know, many times prayer is focused around temporal needs. You know, God, I need help paying my rent. God, I need some assistance at work. So I'm trying to deal with something that's like immediately in the present. But there's a level of praying that gets at your divine assignment, that where what I call the mundane aspects of life, the paying the rent, keeping the lights on, that kind of stuff, becomes secondary and subordinate to your divine assignment. And your divine assignment is you can retire from your work, you can retire from your job, but you can never retire from your divine assignment that carries with you for the rest of your life. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You guys know me, but there may be somebody watching this on YouTube. I'm Reverend Sherri James, and I'm the Senior Minister for Understanding Principles, and I am so excited tonight. We are in the second quarter. I've reorganized how we're doing the Bible Hangout, and we're working by quarters. And what that allows is for me to take a week off in between to just think and process, to just, kind of regroup. And so we finished the first quarter where we studied my book, The Money Poems. And this quarter, we are diving into the Proverbs. So I'm really, 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 really excited about the Proverbs. I think it's going to be fantastic. And, the Bible is a spiritual book, no doubt. But the wisdom literature, of which the Proverbs belongs to, the wisdom literature is where you get all of that practical teaching that is really not concerned with, do you believe in God the way that we talk about God? So really excited to dive into that. I wanted to share with you one poem because I'm going to be sharing wisdom literature from other traditions. And Meister Eckhart is don't get me telling stories. Meister Eckhart is, Meister Eckhart. He was a German theologian, and he lived in the year, he was born in the year 1260 and died in the year 1328. So what is that? 2021 minus 1260, that's at least 800 years ago or thereabouts, seven to 800 years ago. So a little while ago. But he wrote a poem, several poems, but he was a, oh gosh, let me see. He was born in Germany. He entered the Dominican order. And I want to give you this one poem. So one of the quotes that he said that's attributed to him and you've heard repeated many times, is that if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. If the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. And then he says, the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. And so early on, he is what we call one of the antecedents of New Thought. And by that, we mean that there are people through history that have been carrying this thought, this idea of oneness with God, this connection with the divine, that this is not new. We're not doing anything that hasn't been done before. We're doing it in our language, in our time, but it's not new. And so we trace the history of New Thought, and Meister Eckhart is one of the people that we trace that history through. And one of the things that I love, and of course, what I teach is for everyone. Please understand that there is no discrimination, no exclusion at all. But I love that the study of metaphysics and Bible metaphysics has landed in the hands of this African-American community of people in the US and the Caribbean and in Canada. There's something, we've made a focused effort in the Universal Foundation for Better Living to become experts at metaphysical Bible interpretation. And at a time when many New Thought organizations are moving away from metaphysical study in a more than just like, I'm going to tell you what something means metaphysically, but I mean really doing metaphysical study. The UFBL has said, no, we're going to drill down. And so this thought that has been tumbling through history has landed in the laps of us. And I'm fascinated by that. I'm jazzed by that. And I'm like, wow, and so it's on us to decide, will we keep this alive or will we let it go? Will we love this idea enough so that we may nurture it, shape it according to our influence so that we may pass it on to the next generation? So it's one of the reasons I love what we do in the UFBL, and that I encourage you, one, learn how to do metaphysical Bible interpretation and then do it. Like, don't. But there's a poem that Meister Eckhart wrote that is my favorite poem, and it just makes me laugh. And I'm gonna post it in the chat as well. Very, very short poem. And it's called, I Bet God. I bet God, if he let go of my hand, I would weep so loudly. I would petition with all my might. I would cause so much trouble that I bet God would come to his senses and never do that again. I love that poem so much. It's so like in it is this idea that I can never be separated from God. But I bet if God ever tried something like that, I would act such a dang on fool. God would be like, no. Where's her hand at? I can't let her hand go. And you know that relationships like that, where you try to like inch away from the relationship and they act such a fool that you're like, okay, I'll come back. That I just love that. So anyway, let's get into the lesson. Make sure this is up and correct. Okay. All right, there is a way to do this to actually share a portion of my screen. Excuse me. So we're gonna figure this out. All right, did we get that? Look at there. Zoom master. So we're going to go, I'm working with a handout that I gave you guys. And so I want to, you should have gotten it via email. If you did not get it, let me know and I will make it available to you. And so that's, we're going to go really, tonight is just a survey to help you understand the context of Proverbs, but I'm going to talk about Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. So the wisdom literature is what Proverbs is a part of. And so these wisdom books that are in what we call the Hebrew Bible, and we make a point to call it the Hebrew Bible versus say the Old Testament, because in truth, it's somebody's Bibles today. So it would be like somebody calling the New Testament the Old Testament. It's like, wait, I still study the New Testament. So we use the term Hebrew scriptures or Hebrew Bible and Christian scriptures. So the Hebrew Bible, the wisdom books include Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes. It's characterized by this praise of human intelligence. It is applied to understanding the ways of the world. So what you find in these books, Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Psalm, what you find is this attempt to understand, like, how does the world work? And if you get that, like, metaphysics is very much interested in, like, what's the deeper teaching? Like, where does this take me and how does this reveal to me the way that the world works? And so it tends to be very individually oriented. And at the same time, it's also very universal and humanistic in its orientation. So the handout that I gave you has blanks. So what I'm going to give you now are the things that go in the blanks. And I'll try to go at a decent amount pace so that you can write in what goes in the blanks. So the first thing is that there are two major sources for Israel's interest in wisdom. Two major sources. And so one is the family, and the second is formal education. The family. So you think about, like, how we pass information down in our world. And we have really kind of the same thing. We have the family, although there are some things that are changing now with the advent of online education and a lot of the stuff moving to these, I feel like everybody has a course nowadays, and it's all of it is like anywhere from $1,000 to like $5,000. I'm going to teach you how to do whatever it is I'm going to teach you how to do. And so the two major sources are family, meaning what you pass down through relatives, and also through formal education. And so the wisdom books differ among themselves in style and subject matter, but they all have certain characteristics in common, which set them off from other biblical books. So you can't line any of them up together, but there are things that are consistent across and set them apart from other biblical books. So the first thing is that they don't have a whole lot of interest in divine salvation. So you're not going to read in Psalms or in Proverbs or in Ecclesiastes this appeal for divine salvation. It's just not concerned with that. So you won't find that kind of language. It is also not interested in history. So you won't find Proverbs seeking to tell you about, how Israel got to be where it is, only from the standpoint of explaining how Israel messed up in terms of obeying the law, but not from like the way that, say, the Kings or the Chronicles or the books of Samuel cover that history. There's also this questioning attitude that you're going to see about the problems of life. So there's this interest, like, why do people suffer? Right? If you think about Job is extremely interested in, why do bad things happen to good people? Like, what's going on? If you go to Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything, right? It's trying to understand, like, what's happening? Why can't I hold on to the good stuff? But it's also like, man, all the stuff is fleeting. I did all this work. I get to the end of my life and I die. I don't take any of it with me. Like, like this doesn't make any sense. So it's trying to understand, like, why is there suffering? Why is there inequality? Like, what is that about? And these are, if you think about it, these are no different from the questions that we wrestle with today. We have many ways that we think about and talk about inequality that sound different from the Bible, but the issue is still the same. We have massive inequality. I was driving home today from the LAX area to Glendale, and they have shut down Echo Park. And Echo Park is this beautiful lake, I think it's man-made lake in the middle of the city that has like swan boats and other things. So it's like an attraction for families local to that area. Well, we have so many people living in tents that there are areas of LA that you can drive past and it literally looks like an encampment. And it's creating all kinds of public health issues, and people are trying to figure out what to do. And so what you're going to find in Psalms and Proverbs and Job is, what's going on? What is this about? This inequality, this death? Why do the wicked seem to prosper? Like, what's up with that? People who are don't seem to care at all about other people, and they seem to do well. You'll also find in the wisdom literature that there is this search for the ways to master life and to understand how humans should behave before God. So again, it's not concerned with divine salvation. It is concerned with, how do I, like, day to day deal with life as it appears? Like, what do I do about that? There's a really big interest in universal human experiences that affect all people and not just believers in Yahweh. So you're going to find that and you probably have found that there are people who will quote Proverbs, probably don't know they're quoting Proverbs, but they're quoting Proverbs because it's just wisdom literature. You don't have to be a quote unquote believer in order for this to make sense. And so these books are, again, like I said, it's when we talk about in New Thought, part of the reason that we're accepting of all people is that we recognize that spiritual principle don't care who you are or how you show up or what you do or who you do it with. So spiritual principle operates, period. If you walk off of a building, the law of gravity does not check your bank balance, your birth date, your family lineage, none of that. If you get in an airplane and you learn to fly an airplane, if you disobey the law of aerodynamics, none of your quote unquote pedigree is going to keep that plane in the air, because you have got to agree with and cooperate with the law of aerodynamics. So you'll find this in the wisdom literature that it doesn't matter if you're a believer in Yahweh or not, because the law applies to you equally. There is great joy in contemplation of creation and God as creator. So you'll find that a lot of the wisdom literature sounds a lot like the things that you hear people say in New Thought, because these are things that are important to us. Our approach to Jesus is as a wisdom teacher, is as a way shower, an elder brother, a master teacher, different from Lord and Savior who's going to come do something for you, right? So so you get that distinction. There's a difference in the approach. So we both celebrate Jesus, but we celebrate in different ways. And you'll find that in the wisdom literature that there is this contemplation of creation that I am. If you listen to somebody like a Michael Beckwith, and his words, I read the headline for one of his most recent sermons that says, "You are a destiny revealer." And I thought, ooh, that sounds good and yummy, right? It is this contemplation of my relationship with God that God, it indwells itself as me, expresses itself as me. And so there's this fascination with that. So we're going to go really quickly through the book of Job. Are there any questions about that? Let me stop and ask for questions. Any questions about that? Anything that's unclear? So the book of Job, we don't really know the date for the book of Job. There's a lot of challenges with dating it, but they generally place it around the 6th century, so 600 years before the life of Jesus. But scholars disagree because there are parts of Job that seem to reflect a very old and very ancient tradition, and then there are some that are more present to that 6th century BCE. What I heard one scholar say once is that it's actually a mashup of two traditions. So there, because it opens with this conversation between God and, I don't know if it's called the devil or Satan, right? And then it gets into this like interaction between Job and his friends, and then it goes back to a conversation between God and Satan. And so literally you can look at the writing styles, those other things, that the writing style changes, which tells you that it's a different writer, because your voice is as unique. Your voice as a writer is as unique as your voice, as your fingerprint. So if I won't, but if I assigned all of you papers, and let's say I assigned you 2 papers or 3 papers, there are certain things that you do with language that are going to be consistent from paper to paper to paper. And so that a teacher would know if you plagiarized, simply because it just wouldn't be in your voice. Your voice is that consistent. Typically the mistakes that you make in spelling or grammar or word use or whatever, right? Those things tend to be consistent. And so you'll find with historical writers that when people are doing what they call, I think it's called source criticism, that when they're doing source criticism, that what it allows them to do is say, there's a different writer. And so in the Hebrew, it's a little bit more obvious. You can see the different voice that's writing in those early chapters and those end chapters versus in those middle chapters. And what some scholars believe is that essentially they opened up a story, dropped in that middle part, and then kind of bookended it with this other story. Again, these are, looking at, hold on, let me get this out of the way. Got a comment. Right. Andrea said, someone pretended to be me on Facebook recently. My friends knew it wasn't me. Right, exactly. Because there's a signature to the way that you communicate and the way that you do things. So yes. So the author of the book of Job moves beyond the simple acceptance of God's will to ask hard questions of the traditional and overconfidence wisdom found in the Proverbs and the prophets. So you're going to find that these books are sometimes disagreeing with one another. Generally, we've been taught about the Bible as if it presents a singular point of view. And I would really love for you to get rid of that idea, because it does not. In the book of Job, Job is questioning this idea of something happened to me and it's the will of God. And you'll find that there are other areas of the Bible where there is this acceptance of, hey, if it happened, if God must have wanted it to happen. And the author of the book of Job is like, wait, hold up. That's not adding up for me. All right, so that's what goes in that blank, Proverbs and in the prophets. So the question that is central to the book of Job is, why do the evil prosper and the honest never seem to get ahead? Why do the evil prosper and the honest never seem to get ahead? Does that sound like a question that you and I and people of our generation are asking? And I would say yes. We want to know. We look, I don't want to name names, but we just came through an election cycle. Depending on what side of the aisle you on, you feel like the other person, the other group is the evil. Why do the evil prosper and the honest never seem to get ahead? I had someone tell me that someone in Bryan, Texas, went in and shot up some folk like today. And they were like, so the person was arrested. So right now you already know the race of the person. This is the conversation, someone told me this earlier today. Again, I want you to get that what I'm trying to do is humanize and contextualize the people that write the scriptures, because often we tend to think of the Bible as holy, 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 and we think of it as like removed from everyday life, but they're asking the same questions we're asking. How did this guy go and kill all these people and he's still alive? Ah, okay. So in many ways, the book is a parody of the smug prophets and wise teachers who assure people that everything will be all right. So yeah, you know what a parody is. I'm gonna keep going because I don't want to. I could dive down in here and do a deep dive, and then we'll be here at 9 o'clock at night, and that is not my intention for y'all. I want y'all to get some sleep, and me too. It also explores a deeper question of how one who is faithful ever comes to know God. See, we've been given this very simplistic view of Job, and Job is very complex. Job is really trying to get at, wait a minute. Wait a cotton picking minute. I'm living right. And you kill he killed the children, then the farm life. Then I think the wife died, and the wife is like, you need to just go on and curse God and die. And he is holding true to the principle, like, no, I am going to bless God no matter what. So this question of just trying to understand, like, how does somebody who is faithful, who is having all these challenging things happen to them, how do they come to know God? And so the author's reply is that no one relates to God on the basis of justice or equal rights. No one relates to God on the basis of justice or equal rights. So we're not interested in, is life fair? That's not what we're interested in. We're not interested in, is life fair? The book of Job teaches that from the midst of doubt and questioning comes trust. So there is this almost encouragement of questioning God, because where it's going to lead you is a trust in God. So from the midst of doubt and questioning comes trust. And so the book of Job is constructed like a dramatic place. You remember I said that essentially there's this, prologue, middle section where Job is hanging with his friends, and then the epilogue, I had to get that right, epilogue where God and Satan come back together, right? And the rest of the book is sandwiched in between. And so the suffering and the injustice that characterize the world have baffled humankind for millennia. So it's not new to us. The book of Job really doesn't give an answer, but what it does offer is this warning against the temptation to blame victims by assuming that their wickedness, or the era of blaming God by assuming God is wicked. It basically is saying you have to trust God, and in the questioning process you grow to that trust. But saying that, well, their consciousness drew it, it's like, I don't know that I would go that route. And so this is just an outline of Job. It's the first two chapters is a folk tale about how God tested Job. Then there's the dialogue between Job and his three friends over the meaning of divine justice. Then this fourth adversary, Elihu, comes in and he challenges both of the friends and Job. And then God himself appears and recites the power and marvels beyond human understanding that show Job's arrogance. And then God restores Job to his greatness. And so it's this movement, right, through Job, and this dramatization of someone going through hardship. Any questions on Job? Any comments? Wonderful. So the book of Psalms, it contains the principal collection of religious lyric poetry in the Bible. There are 150 poems, most of which are prayers that are addressed to God. And so the Psalms are 150 basically prayer poems. They were intended to be sung or accompanied by music. And they don't seem to have any special order or theme development. No special order or theme development. So there are 6 major types of psalms. So letter A, there's hymns of praise. Letter B, there are thanksgiving hymns. Letter C, there are individual laments. Letter D, community laments. Letter E, Yahweh, or the royal psalms that are honoring either Yahweh or the earthly king as his deputy. And finally, I gave the answer and then to put a blank anyway. Letter F, wisdom psalms, wisdom psalms. I guess I can fix that. There we go. So there are other smaller types that are also identified. So for example, you have a wedding song. You could have a processional song for the entering of the temple. If you think about, I know at Up Church, we used to always do, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, right? That was how we entered the sanctuary. Or this is Reverend Della's time, we would sing a tweaked version of Ain't No Stopping Us Now. And the choir would come in from the back of the room. Ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move. Ain't no stopping us now. We're in God's groove. Ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move. Ain't no stopping us now. We're in God's groove. And they would sing that on the way up to the choir stand. Festival songs, right? We have those. So these are things that you're finding in the Psalms. So most of the Psalms have a very similar structure that are basically these 4 elements. It starts with an address to God. So then it goes to some type of lament, right? Something that they're complaining about. And then there is this confession of trust in God. There is an exclamation of certainty, and then there's a vow of praise. And so you think about the Psalm 91. Just blanked on the start of it. But he who abides under the shadow of the Almighty, you know, I will abide in the secret place of the Most High. And it goes through and it gives this trust in God that I will be protected. 10,000 may fall at my right, left side, or 1,000 may fall at my left side, 10,000 at my right side. Then there's, this exclamation of certainty, but it shall not come near me. You know, and you think about the 23rd Psalm, it ends with, I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know, you prepare a table for me in the presence of mine enemies, right? It's this address to God to know, you know, I'm writing this letter to God, this poem to God. I'm expressing a lament. So I'm expressing something that I'm challenged by. Then I have, excuse me, a confession of my trust in God, an exclamation of my certainty that my trust is going to pay off, and then this vow of praise. The Psalms have been organized into 5 books so that the Psalter will match the Pentateuch in shape. So the Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And so that 5 repeats. And so whoever organized the Psalms organized them that way. Chat. Thank you, Kimberly. All right. Most of the Psalms really tell us very little about the time and circumstances of their composition. They are a microcosm of the religious insights and convictions of the ancient Israelites. Some of them were composed as much as 3,000 years ago, but they can be, you know, inspiring to us today. And so those first 41 Psalms are an early collection of Davidic hymns. The next 30, from 42 to 72, is a northern collection of hymns. The northern, what that means is the northern kingdom. So when the kingdom split, so Israel was united under David, it was united under Solomon. And when Solomon passed, the people revolted and the country split apart. And so the 10 tribes the 10 northern tribes retained the name Israel. The 2 southern tribes became known as Judah. And Assyria, which was one of the superpowers of the day, conquered Israel and scattered the people. And this was the way that they conquered, that they basically came in and the people had to leave their homes and resettle elsewhere. And then they brought other nations that they had conquered and resettled them in Israel. And so essentially there was they couldn't come back. And we call them the lost tribes of Israel because there's no historical record of these people after the conquering of Assyria, or after Assyria conquered them. So we know that they're northern by the things that they talked about. There were specific political issues that the northern kingdom was concerned with and things that they dealt with. And so this is how we know that those 30 hymns, Psalm 42 to Psalm 72, belong to the northern kingdom. The next 73 to 89, the next 15, 16, 17 are a collection from the temple singers. Book 4, Psalms 90 to 106. These are psalms from a royal collection because they deal with like the kingdom, but not the kingdom of heaven, but the physical kingdom. And then the final book, book 5, Psalm 107 to 150, is a second and expanded Davidic royal collection. Any questions on Psalms? Okay. Proverbs. So Proverbs is the classic book of wisdom. And even though the book probably reached its final form in only post-exilic time. So let's talk about post-exilic. The northern kingdom gets scattered and the people are gone and lost to the pages of history, which is why we call them the lost tribe. The kingdom of Judah, which contained Jerusalem and pretty much encompasses a good portion of the area that is known as like modern day Israel. The kingdom of Judah, which were the 2 southern tribes, stood for another 150 years. And then the Babylonians came in and conquered Judah. And they decimated the temple. And what they did is they took the top people in the country and put them in service to the Babylonian government. And so this is where we get our heroes of the faith, the Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, Daniel in the lion's den. These are people that were working inside or working on behalf of the Babylonian government, but who were maintaining their Hebrew tradition. They didn't forsake the God of their ancestors. So that period when Israel is in Babylon is considered the post-exilic period or post-exile. Am I saying that right? No, that's the exilic period. Then a king comes to power and, oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. I say Nehemiah. Oh, who was the prophet? I'm blanking on the prophet. But one of the prophets basically convinces the king to let them go back and rebuild the temple. And Ezra, Ezra convinces the king to let them go back and rebuild the temple after the Babylonians destroyed it. Because part of what happens is that Babylonia conquers Judah and siphon off basically the talent in the country, and the people who were left behind are the people who they were the followers in the country. They weren't going to stand up. They weren't nation builders. Excuse me. Then Persia conquers Babylon or Babylonia. And under the Persian government, Ezra appeals to the king or head of state or whomever, and basically gets the blessing from the head of the Persian government to go back and rebuild Judah and to rebuild the temple, which was located in Jerusalem in the southern kingdom. And so when those people that go back to do the building, Nehemiah, Ezra, and others, that is the post-exilic period. So Proverbs, that's what it means when it says it reached its final form in post-exilic time. So these were things that, let me make it contextual. Those of us that are on this call, the other people will be watching later, but those of us whose ancestors were brought from the continent here. And then we're here, we're in this situation, and there's a sea change, let's say. And then we en masse go back and rebuild the continent. So there's the exile, and then there's the post-exile. So just so we have try to make it contemporary. The chief aim of Proverbs seems to be the inculcation of wisdom as a means to social tranquility and a happy life. Basically, if you know how to do life, you have peace in your society. If you don't know how to do life, you have chaos, because people don't understand how they are creating their own experience. We'll see that as we go. Solomon's reputation for wisdom was so great that Israel considered him the founder of their wisdom tradition. And so the book of Proverbs is often attributed to Solomon, even though it's really a collection of writings, possibly some of them inspired by him, but not necessarily all of them. But his reputation for wisdom was so great that Israel considered him the founder of their wisdom tradition. Many of the wise sayings were probably collected at Solomon's command. Others came much later in the time of King Hezekiah of Judah, and still others came from other wise teachers and kings. So this is a collection of writings, even though the way it's been handed to many of us is that King Solomon wrote them all. But it's likely that he inspired or commanded or decided to have many of them collected, but it's been a compilation over time. The basic theme of the book is that at the heart of all wisdom stands fear of the Lord. And I want to clarify fear, because fear is not the way that we talk about fear today, where you're afraid. Fear is about reverence. It's about awe. It's about just being blown away by God and the vastness of God, but not fear in the sense of like running from something. And so this, you'll find this as we go through it, that the basic thing, the heart of wisdom, like everything reduces back to respect the Lord, respect the Lord. The overall purpose of learning Proverbs is to master life. And that's why I'm excited for this, because many of the things that we think of as catchy sayings come right up out of the Proverbs. So the overall purpose of learning Proverbs is to master life. And the Proverbs, they invited reflective thought and new discoveries of its meanings. The Proverbs invited reflective thought and new discoveries of its meanings. I want to say something to make you think. Someone said, give you an example. This could be in Proverbs, I'm not sure, but it definitely is a modern day saying. Someone said, I don't hang around hungry people. And the person was like, well, why not? They said, because for the right price, they will eat you. And so you want to be around people that have something. I thought that was quite funny. It made me laugh, but just to give you an example of a modern day use of that. So the outline of Proverbs, there are 5 parts as we go through. So I'll finalizing the outline, but I'll give you the outline that we'll work with going through. We're just going to literally go right from Proverbs 1 all the way to Proverbs 31. The Proverbs values hard work and diligence. It warns against excessive sleep and sex and wine. Proverbs recommends honesty in your business affairs and kindness and loyalty, impartiality, sobriety and humility, restraint and sincerity. Wealth is very nice, but it's not to be desired at the cost of calmness and peace. And so the first 22 chapters of Proverbs are likely the Proverbs of Solomon. The sayings of the wise you'll find from Proverbs 22:17 to 24:34. The 25th through the 29th chapter are more Proverbs of Solomon that were copied by the men of Hezekiah. The 30th chapter are the sayings of Agur, son of Jacob. And the last chapter is the sayings of King Lemuel, an oracle. So it ends with 2 oracles. All right, so just to keep wrapping out the wisdom literature. So we're going to talk about Ecclesiastes and also Song of Solomon. And these will be quick, and then we'll open up for questions or anything that you guys have. The Hebrew name Koheleth or Kohelet is what Ecclesiastes essentially translates from. It's a second attack on the optimism and piety of conventional wisdom. The book is mostly in first person. There's a third person introduction and a little epilogue. So Ecclesiastes is also called Koheleth. That's a typo up there. Hold on, let me fix that. Ecclesiastes is also called Koheleth and is considered the most skeptical book in the Bible. The word Koheleth is Hebrew for a preacher. It's the Hebrew word for preacher. The author's theme is vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Basically, y'all getting hopped up and hopping mad about nothing. This is just, this thing is passing away. You come, you get a few things, but you got to go, and you can't take any of it with you. It teaches that futility and emptiness result from the constant human searching for the meaning of life. This idea, you're not going to find a meaning. Stop looking. It's very, very skeptical. And I know you know people like that. I know people like that. The author admits that God does direct all things, but we cannot know what God is doing or why. The proper response is to enjoy what God gives. So basically, it's like, just be in the present moment. You can't control none of this, right? The Song of Solomon. So for many people, the Song of Solomon is the most surprising book to be included in the Hebrew canon. It is a beautiful and very erotic love song that celebrates human sexuality and physical passion. Ooh, the Bible got it all. This is the third book that's attributed to Solomon. He seems to be more the model to follow than its author. It shows signs of being worked and reworked through many centuries. Again, we're given these very simplistic ways of looking at the Bible. I want to tell you that is not what ministers are taught in seminary. They are given the information that I'm giving you now. And then they come out and they get in their pulpits and they say, Solomon wrote it, and that's that. And you believe them. But what you find with the Bible is that there are human fingerprints all over it. And I don't consider those human fingerprints a faith shaker, but maybe for somebody else it does. But what you find is that there are tweaks, that because these books were copied by hand over centuries. First of all, they were passed down orally over centuries before they were written down and copied by hand orally for centuries before we get to the printing press. And what we think of as a fixed canon with the 66 books that we have really was not a fixed canon until the printing press. And so you had different communities that were studying different books. And it was only at the time that someone said, we're going to bind this and make it into a book, that you got to decide what goes in the beginning, what goes in the middle, and what goes at the end. But before that, you would have some communities that studied Mark and Matthew, others that would study only John, others that studied the Hebrew scriptures and none of the New Testament, what we call the Christian scriptures. So there's this human evolution that's happening with the text over time. At the oldest level are love poems, perhaps wedding songs that go back to the time of Solomon. At the latest level are Persian and Greek phrases that indicate additions after the exile. So again, how do I know that something is today versus yesterday? So for example, in our time, you have, we would know if something was written before 9/11 or something was written after 9/11, right? We would be able to keep up with that, right? We would be able to we would be able to look at a story and tell, did this happen in 1999 before 9/11, or did this happen in 2020, right? Because there are these telltale signs of what was going on during that time period. And so if you read a story that talked about activity in the World Trade Center, but did not mention that the towers basically been destroyed or flattened by planes that were flew into them, then you know that that's a story that at least happened September 10th, 2001 or earlier, right? And so it's the same thing with these texts. There are things, when you see these Persian and Greek phrases, the Persians and Greeks were not involved in Israel until after the exile. So this is how we know, one of the ways, this is how we know, just looking at the content, that it didn't happen as early as Solomon. It just, and again, because we read in English, we think that we've read the Bible. One of my teachers, Dr. Will Coleman, said, if you've only read the Bible in English, you haven't read the Bible. Finally, it is accepted as an allegory describing the love of Yahweh for Israel as a beloved bride, not a bridge. Sherri, gosh. Let's get that G out of there. Okay. Okay. And these typos. So that is the wisdom literature. It is interested in practical application. How do I put this teaching on its feet? How do I live this message? And it's not interested in divine salvation. It is interested in everyday practical living. How do you relate to one another? How do you deal with someone on the job that is, envious of you? Or how do you deal with someone on the job that you're envious of? These are all things that are of concern, things that matter to us and things that matter to them as well. Any questions? Any ahas? Anybody like, oh my God, I'm so excited, or oh my God, I'm intimidated?
I would say that my oh my God is that it's kind of like the same thing that I'm getting on Sundays with Bible One.
Yes.
It's like, oh my God, I'm about to really, really pull the covers off of this and see what is lurking underneath. I'm really about to see what is truly up and not have it be someone else's agenda.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. And along with that, I think the point that you were making about all the different hands on this and that is, it's just, that doesn't take away, like you said, it may, for some people, it might, like, what did you think? God was, it was found like some other major religion where, he found it on some golden plates. God used these people that had different characteristics about themselves.
Right.
Yeah, so I really appreciated the background, and that it was a good, nice survey
Good.
And then explaining the northern and lost tribe and southern tribes. You know, my mother is totally, you know, now I know some of the stuff that she's talking about, because when Israel split, and I'm like, what? Okay, that really helps. So thank you.
And you know something, and I said this because when we were doing this, this was the year before the election year. And there are so many parallels that I see between what we went through in 2019, well, 2016, 2017, 2018, all the way up until January 20th, 2021.
Yeah.
There's so many parallels to that
Mm.
that it's mind-blowing. And meaning that so Solomon, David united the kingdom. So they were just warring tribes. Sometimes they got along, sometimes they cooperated, but many times they didn't. But under King David, they united as a nation, and they were considered the United Kingdom.
Mhm.
Hear that word, United Kingdom. And it's nothing new under the sun. And so they were united under King David. His son with Bathsheba is Solomon, and Solomon succeeds to the throne. And Solomon goes on this massive building spree that basically breaks the back of the people financially, emotionally, everything. And you had so much time that you had to give, there's a term for it, I'm just blanking on it right now, where you had to participate in a work project for the government. Of course, these are the working classes that have to do that. But what it did with this building project is it created tiers in society. And so in the urban areas, you had this concentration of wealth, and in the rural areas, you had this, you know, extreme poverty compared, right? And then, but it's like, if you think about like how our world is set up now, like you have these financial centers in LA, in New York, in, you know, Chicago and different areas. And then you go to like, you know, I don't know, South Dakota, you know, wherever. And there's no shade on South Dakota. Don't nobody leave me no hate comments, no troll comments. But my point is that these financial centers, the money gets concentrated there, and the resources then are not available. And it creates this tension. And the country literally split. And you know, after Solomon died, and Rehoboam, his son, was not able to hold them together. And led by Jeroboam, who was kind of the spokesperson for the 10 northern tribes, he comes to negotiate with Rehoboam, and Rehoboam is immovable, and so they break away. And the problem, though, is that so we think of like, you know, like we're having church right now, right? We're having our gathering, but that wasn't the way that you honored God in that tradition. The way you honored God was that you went to the temple in the southern kingdom, which is in Jerusalem. That also meant that the commerce flowed into Jerusalem. And so the northern kingdom had to deal with that, because the money is flowing into the southern kingdom, right? Because people are making their pilgrimage to the temple that Solomon built, which is in Jerusalem. And so what they do is that they erect statues in Dan, in the Dan, and I'm blanking on the southern one. The Dan, and I forgot what the other tribe was, but basically at two ends of the northern kingdom. And they're like, you don't need to go to the temple. You can go make your sacrifices right here inside of our country. You know, don't go over to Canada to get what you need to get. You can come right here, right? Pay your money right here. Bring your commerce right here. And so sometimes you'll hear writers from the southern kingdom talking about the statues of Baal, because they're referring to these statues that were basically erected as a substitute for going to the temple that was inside the palace that King Solomon built in Jerusalem. So I guess sometimes it's like, these people ain't no different than us. They really are no different. They got the same issues. Ain't nothing new under the sun. It's the same old stuff with a Bible verse on it.
Rev, when you say that we're living in pretty much the same times again, it made me think of when Trump was running for president, and how Carlton Pearson was crying out about him and all the evangelicals. And you were saying he's just like the old prophets back in the day who were crying out to the people to listen and look and see what's happening. And it made
Yes.
me look at Carlton Pearson in a whole new way. That was real cool.
Yes, yes, yes. If you go and look at who's somebody that's like a real, any one of them, because they all railed against exploiting the poor, ignoring the widows and the orphans, stealing from the government. It like literally, as we were going through this, because we did a series on the entire Bible in 2019, it literally was like, there's really nothing new under the sun. We are reliving this same stuff. And it's the voice of the prophet that comes up to say, this, you're not going to get away with this. This can't be what your faith is about. Mm-hmm. So I want to tell you some of the materials that I'm using. I'm going to, for the most part, there's nothing for you to purchase. I'm going to supply all of the worksheets and things that we use, but just if you are building out your Bible library, the commentary that I'm working from is the Anchor Bible series, and Proverbs is divided into 2 volumes, Proverbs 1 through 9 and Proverbs 10 through 31. And what these books, what commentaries give you is a way to think about the context that you're writing. So I'll be using that. I don't have I'll be using my concordance, the commentaries, and the New Revised Standard Version, the American Standard Version, and the King James Version. And I use the King James because my concordance, you always want your concordance to match the version of the Bible. So I'll be using that. So just so if there are things that you're building out, but building out the commentary library is super expensive. So both of these were like 50 each, something like that. So just so you have an idea of like the books. And so I've been building out my commentary library. I think I have Matthew, Proverbs, Isaiah, Genesis. I take my time. And so as we study, I get the books, but to get a full complement of the commentary is about a $600 to $1,000 investment. Just so you have an idea. This is not a cheap effort. So those are the texts that I'll be using to walk through this study. So if you decide you want to do that. Oh, and I'll also be using or referring to Alden Studebaker's Wisdom for a Lifetime. So what I'll do is I'll send a follow-up email. And those of you that are watching on YouTube, you are seeing this on Friday. And if you want to join live, just leave a comment or send me an email, and I'll make sure that you're on the mailing list. But we've got 12 weeks of the Proverbs. So we're going to go all the way to June 24th. Any questions? I'm excited. It's going to be good. Wonderful. Thank you so much for tonight. I hope this was helpful and supported your expansion. One of the things that I read to myself every morning as part of just staying present to my vision is that I am committed to giving generously and sharing my gifts and talents with the world on an international stage. I am one of God's builders. I build people who build great things. And so you guys are the people who build great things. And so my prayer is that what I gave you contributed to building you. Thank you. I love and appreciate you. Have a beautiful evening. I will see you guys next week. Take care. Oh my God, I did. Okay. Whew.